Hello, everyone. Welcome to Anatomy. I'm so excited that you're here to join us this season. Anatomy is definitely my favorite event. I really enjoy learning about it all through middle and high school, and I really hope you do as well. So today I'll just be offering a very broad overview of the event in general, the material that we'll be covering for each of these systems that we'll be learning about. And just as a forewarning, these slides are definitely the most text-heavy slides ever of the whole series, because I'm not really talking about the concepts themselves, but more just like giving an overview of what we'll be talking about in the future. So I hope this session will give you a general look at the things we'll be talking about, and you can see if it suits your interests, and hopefully you'll stay for the future episodes as well. So without further ado, let's get started. So this year we will be focusing on three major body systems: the integumentary system, which deals with hair, skin, and nails, pretty much everything that you can see and physically touch on a human being. The skeletal system, which is pretty self-explanatory, that makes up your bones and joints. We'll also look at some regulatory functions of the skeleton. And lastly, the muscular system. And we'll be focusing especially on skeletal muscles, which are the muscles that we typically think about most often that help us move around and do our daily activities and all those things. So these are the three systems we'll be learning about. For each of the systems, we'll be learning basic anatomy concepts. So basic anatomy concepts is actually like a more general umbrella thing that we'll be learning in our first unit, and that will kind of set the foundation that will be used for pretty much any system you want to learn about, whether this year or in the future. Things like, how is the body oriented relative to how we're studying? There's something called anatomical position, perhaps you've heard of that. We'll be talking about what that is, how we describe body parts in relation to each other, how we position or section specimens, and take a look at that. And then for each of these three systems, more specifically, we'll be talking about their structure and their function. So typically you'll hear people talking about anatomy and physiology. Together, those two concepts go hand in hand. And really, that's just a really fancy way of saying the structure and function of the human body, anatomy being structure and physiology being function. So we'll be looking at how structure and function are intimately related for pretty much any body process. And lastly, for all three of these systems, we'll be talking about diseases with sort of a more clinical case studies based approach, which I think is really valuable and interesting. That will sort of be a lot of the format of the test. You'll really get to practice your critical thinking and problem solving skills. So things that will entail for each of these diseases are causes and risk factors, how to diagnose the disease, signs and symptoms, and treatment or prevention. So yeah, I'll just give us all a brief overview of each of these topics in sequence, the first one being the integumentary system. So y'all can read. So I won't be reading these bullet points to you, but basically we'll be talking about the structure and function of skin, hair, and nails, like this diagram shown here on the left. By the end of this unit, you'll know what all of these things in this diagram are, including different kinds of sensory receptors and glands and hair, which are all associated with skin. We'll also talk briefly about the effects of aging on the integumentary system and how different elements change. We'll also take a look at some diseases. I've just put the list of diseases here. This picture on the right is one example. It's actually acne. So just as a little preview, basically what happens with most types of acne is hair follicles are inflamed, which means you have blood vessels dilating and you have leukocytes, which are those little like white squiggly things in the last picture, kind of swarming to the site and causing redness, swelling, pain to build up in that localized area. And that's because of bacteria proliferating in the hair follicle. The second system is the skeletal system, which we're examining specifically bones and joints. These are the concepts we'll be going over. We'll be looking at the gross anatomy of bones, so what they look like if you kind of slice them open, what they look like on the inside, as well as how they interact with each other in joints. And we'll focus specifically on the skull, vertebrae, and pelvis just a little bit because those bones are irregularly shaped and they're kind of interesting. We'll also look a little bit at regulation of how bones are formed and grown, even in adults, how that delicate balance is achieved between bone deposition and bone remodeling. So here's some figures representing those general topics. I won't go too much in detail right now, but this is sort of the general skeleton structure, which is kind of what you'd expect of an anatomy class. This is the gross anatomy of a bone, sort of a cross section and what everything looks like inside. And over here, we see an example of a synovial joint, which is a kind of joint where you have a fluid-filled capsule within the joint. All right, and this is a list of some of the diseases we'll be looking at. All right, and the third system and the last one is the muscular system, and we'll be focusing on skeletal muscles, as I said before. We will be talking about the differences among skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle, which are the three different types of muscle found in the body, the microscopic structure of muscle fibers, and physiology of how they contract. As well as functions and characteristics of different major skeletal muscles throughout the body. And there is sort of this intimidating figure on the right-hand side here, listing a bunch of different muscles in the body. We won't be talking about every single one of them. That would be very intimidating, but there is kind of a massive list on the rules document that you can take a look at that lists the muscles that we will be focusing on. And I know it looks kind of intimidating right now. It's going to be a lot to learn the function of every single muscle. But do remember that the test for the competition is open book. And we're really focusing on broad concepts. And there's kind of there is a rhyme or reason to how muscles act and what their functions are depending on their location. And we'll take a look at that in the future also. And here's just a list of some of the diseases we'll be looking at. And yeah, so that's just a very quick run through of everything we'll be talking about in this event. So thank you so much for coming and being interested in anatomy. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me by email, which is on the slide here. And I look forward to seeing you all again for episode 1 next time. So until then, take care and have a great day.